There have been rumors basically circulating around Warner Brothers Discovery since like the day that it became a thing after AT&T realized maybe we just want to be a communications company. Maybe we don't want to be a media conglomerate, kind of pieced off Warner Brothers, merged it with Discovery and made a new company. There's always been that hovering thing of like Universal wanting to buy a Warner Brothers Discovery at some point, do some type of acquisition. But now it sounds like there are more immediate talks regarding a merger, possibly with Paramount. And obviously this would have big fallout for DC Comics, especially like in movies, television, streaming, video games, all that kind of stuff. Certainly would open a world of possibilities as far as the things that you could do with properties. And it could be very, very interesting. And it seems like it's something we've been waiting for to happen for a very long time. One of the reasons I've been pretty skeptical about the 10-year plan of James Gunn regarding the DCU that they've been talking about for so long. It's like, how is he ever going to be able to do this? Because we know at some point there's going to be some type of transaction where Warner Brothers Discovery isn't going to be itself anymore. Let's talk about what this could mean for DC Comics and DC Comics properties moving forward as we talk about all the news coming out about this possible merger. Warner Brothers Discovery and Paramount Global have held talks about a potential merger of the two media companies. Variety has confirmed Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav met with Paramount Global CEO Bob Bakish in a lunch meeting Tuesday in New York, where they discussed a possible merger. Sources said Zaslav has also talked with Sherry Redstone, whose National Amusements Incorporated owns a controlling stake in Paramount Global, about a potential combination of the companies. Representatives for Paramount Global and Warner Brothers Discovery declined to comment. Axios first reported the talks. And this is something, like I said, we've been kind of waiting for. We know there's some type of acquisition or a merger, something that was going to happen. And now obviously they're talking with Paramount. And I do not believe this is going to be an isolated incident. There are way too many streaming services out there. There was going to have to be a consolidation. And it sounds like we're going to be getting more mega corporations, which I don't think is probably advantageous to customers, people wanting to support these products and stuff like that, because instead of having, 8 or 9 big media companies, we're going to end up with like 3 or something like that. So I do not believe this is good for competitive market regarding streaming and just entertainment in general. When it comes to DC Comics, this is probably going to be another bad thing. If you recall, DC Comics has been a part of Warner Brothers since I believe the late 70s. And when they did the AT&T acquisition of Warner Brothers, obviously there was consolidation within the company. We've got redundancies. We need to get rid of those. And obviously DC Comics wasn't exactly a big priority when you're talking about a company that size with that kind of revenue, to where it was kind of put on the back burner. And obviously, there are lots of job cuts. In fact, they ended up basically gutting the entire editorial department before they decided to piece it off and do the Warner Brothers Discovery merger kind of thing, acquisition that they did there, where there were likely a few more people let go at the time. And this would likely mean more upheaval, turmoil at DC Comics themselves. Not likely to be an enormous priority during the acquisition itself, although DC Comics, like characters and associated licensing and all that stuff, is a big money generator. It's just not quite to the level of some of these other things that would be involved in that. And I would imagine it's going to be more upheaval and even less concern about what DC Comics are producing on a month-to-month basis. In terms of a possible merger of the companies could not be learned. Both companies have enlisted bankers, but the status of the talks are described as very preliminary. At the end of Q3, Paramount Global reported long-term debt of $15.6 billion, considerably less than Warner Brothers Discovery, whose debt load stood at $43.5 billion. But in terms of market value, Warner Brothers Discovery is the bigger fish, with a market cap of $28.4 billion as of close of trading 20 December, compared to $10.3 billion for Paramount Global. Specifically, Warner Brothers Discovery and Paramount would have an interest in combining their Max and Paramount Plus premium streaming services to better compete with the likes of Netflix and Disney's Disney Plus and Hulu. And obviously that is going to be the big driving factor, not only in this, but other mergers and acquisitions that are going to be going on in the entertainment industry probably over the next decade or so. Obviously, we've seen a lot of that stuff already. We've already had 20th Century Fox acquired by Disney, and everyone is trying to beef up their streaming platforms to compete with the likes of a Disney Plus, now that Hulu should be totally on board, because I believe Disney just bought like the final interest that was still residing with Universal at the time. So they own like 100% of Hulu now. You're going to see that combined obviously with Disney Plus. We've seen Discovery Plus and HBO Max are now Max. So we've already seen like internal consolidation, all that stuff happening. But the market really just can't support 12 different streaming services all at the same time. It probably can't even support more than like 2 or 3. And you do have some big fish out there. Obviously, Netflix is an enormous one, but they don't really own a lot of like libraries. They have to license out a whole lot of stuff. That's why when you look on Netflix, it's not nearly as good as it used to be, just as far as like quality entertainment. It's a bunch of stuff that you've never heard of. And a lot of their like Netflix originals are not very good anymore. Obviously, you've also got Apple out there. Like they're the big kind of elephant in the corner. They've got so much just access to cash that none of these other companies, these entertainment companies have, because they're more of a technology company. Obviously, we've had Apple TV. They're in the market. We've also got Amazon with Prime Video and all these kind of things. So I imagine Apple is on the hunt for a good entertainment property to really beef up things like Apple TV, and for companies like Warner Brothers Discovery and Paramount to have a fighting chance. They are going to have to consolidate or do some type of merger at some point. The streaming wars will probably be one of the biggest detriments to entertainment industry, like in history. The fact that they're going to have to do all this stuff, because just providing a quality streaming service with new content that's regularly coming up is so very expensive. It's so capital intensive. Like if you look at Netflix's numbers, even when they were the only game in town and they were like doing great, man, they had a whole lot of debt because they were constantly having to acquire new stuff and make new stuff just to put it onto their streaming platform. That's one of the reasons that most of these streamers are losing a ton of money nowadays, and one of the reasons these talks are happening. On the film side, Warner Brothers Discovery would acquire top-tier properties from Paramount Pictures, including such films franchises as Terminator, Transformers, Mission Impossible, Top Gun, A Quiet Place, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Godfather, Paranormal Activity, Scream, and the Star Trek film franchises. The Warner Brothers Picture stable includes DC's Extended Universe films, Harry Potter, and Lord of the Rings movie franchises. A merged Warner Brothers Discovery Paramount Global would also be expected to combine their TV operations. Also this week, media mogul Byron Allen reached out to Paramount's top brass to extend a $3.5 billion offer to buy BET Media Group, which includes BET, VH1, and BET Plus streaming services. And that would be like the big acquisition here. And that's kind of one of the things that would definitely affect maybe not DC Comics so much, but DC characters. Is right now, you've got the big 3 franchises for Warner Brothers Discovery. It's DC, Lord of the Rings, and Harry Potter, which they haven't done a whole lot of new stuff with, but it sounds like they want to do a lot of new stuff with the other franchises as well. And it does appear looming on the horizon is a Barbie franchise that could be quite lucrative for Warner Brothers Discovery, but adding things like Terminator, Transformers, Mission Impossible, Top Gun, TMNT, Star Trek, Scream, those are all live and well franchises that put out movies very, very often. So DC probably wouldn't be the enormous priority that it is right now for David Zaslav. When you had so much other stuff out there, you probably wouldn't see quite as many movies, and I don't think we would see the 10-year plan, at least that James Gunn has initially, ever actually being played out, because there would be so many other franchises that they would have to keep up. I imagine we would get less movies featuring DC characters, which wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. Likely a lot less TV shows featuring DC characters, which wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing if you can slow these things down and build out the franchise a little bit slower, kind of like the phases 1 through 3 of the MCU, which was so successful, to where you could really plan and map it out and build up that anticipation. It's kind of hard to do that when you put out 3 movies or 4 movies in a year, plus an additional 3 to 4 streaming shows, in a year, plus animated projects. It does feel like there's a whole lot of Marvel properties out there, and there's certainly a lot of DC stuff that's been out there as well. Now, we are going to get a little bit of a hiatus until we get to Superman Legacy, but these have got to affect what Superman Legacy is leading into and what the DCU is moving forward, because there's only so much money to move around for an annual budget on making new movies and stuff. Now, the potential cool thing, and I can't guarantee that this would happen, is if you had all these franchises under the same umbrella, the idea of obviously we've seen Batman TMNT, but like a Top Gun, like Green Lantern crossover with Hal Jordan, I think would be really cool. There's a lot of stuff you could do there. We have had Green Lantern Star Trek crossovers and stuff like that. So this could probably open up a world of crossover opportunities. I wonder if this new company, if they do the merger, would do the same thing that Marvel has done, to where they acquired all these properties and now Marvel Comics are making, your Alien books, your Predator books, your Planet of the Apes comic books and stuff like that, to where they're bringing those licenses in-house for Marvel Comics to produce. I wonder if they would bring all these properties under DC Comics, because obviously TMNT would be an absolute boon for DC Comics. That would be another top flight franchise. Transformers would be an enormous boost for DC Comics as far as profile and having more characters and franchises to play with that could actually draw some money and put eyeballs on their product. So that kind of stuff could be very, very beneficial for DC Comics themselves, which would be exciting, and certainly to me. And I imagine the timing of this offer for BET Media Group probably coincides with this pretty well, to where you can get an extra $3.5 billion in capital to pay off some of that debt while you're doing the acquisition and ironing all these things out. Plus, you offload some of the stuff that you do have that wasn't probably going to be prioritized, because you're going to have so many enormous franchises under one roof. And certainly from that aspect, it would be cool to have a streaming service with all the shows and cartoons and movies associated with those franchises. That would be a whole lot of fun, and it would be cool, almost like what Netflix used to be when they were the only show in town and they just had everything. And it was a pretty good experience if you're a streaming fan, but the market has just been oversaturated by the amount of streaming services available. All this kind of stuff was inevitable, and it is really the driving force behind all of these acquisitions that are going on lately and are going to be going on for the next 10 years or so. All of this is coming on the heels of some negative reports regarding the financial outlook for Warner Brothers Discovery. The site Macro Axis lists Warner Brothers Discovery stock probability of bankruptcy at 58%. The site says most of Warner Brothers' fundamental indicators, such as probability of bankruptcy, are part of a valuation analysis module that helps investors search for stocks that are currently trading at higher or lower prices than the real value. If the real value is higher than the market price, Warner Brothers Discovery is considered to be overvalued, and we provide a buy recommendation. Otherwise, we render a sell signal. That's from Macro Axis. By comparison, Disney, albeit a much larger company, is at less than 1% as far as their probability for bankruptcy. So Warner Brothers Discovery is not in a great financial situation right now. They are heavily in debt. They are leveraged heavily on debt at this very moment. And they did have a string of enormous failures at the box office throughout 2023, which Disney did as well. But Disney also has enormous theme parks. They have cruise lines. Disney has a lot of other stuff to where they're kind of mitigating risk across different lines of entertainment, to where Warner Brothers Discovery doesn't have that nearly as much, that kind of security net sitting under them, to where they have a year like this where basically everything but Barbie really bombed on them. And they probably ended up losing a lot of money on the DCEU, or at least the last remnants of it. It sounds like Aquaman: The Lost Kingdom is not looking like it's got a good outlook this coming weekend. It almost feels like Warner Brothers Discovery cut bait on that one and just decided to take their losses instead of trying to pull something out of it, even though it made $1 billion the first time. And I imagine this negative financial outlook and the way people are looking at the company brings them to the table just a little bit quicker than maybe they had. And also, there is the looming rumor that Universal was not only rumored to want to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery, but they were also rumored to want to acquire Paramount Global. And in this case, maybe they could bring the value up and everybody could get a nice golden parachute, and Universal could get them both, I guess, in one fell swoop. And then you would add even more franchises underneath one roof. So it should be interesting. And I do not think it's coincidence that these merger talks are happening at this moment when we've got these negative financial outlooks. And it looks like things will be going in a different direction, although this rumor has been looming over Warner Brothers Discovery essentially from its very inception. And 2023 was not kind to them as far as their movie box office receipts and all that. Obviously, DC Comics characters were a huge part of that because the DCEU fell on its ass, and it's a failed venture, and that's why we've got the DCU on the horizon led by James Gunn, although there's some things about that I'm not exactly optimistic about. Let's just put it that way. Now, if you would like more information on your pop culture news and your geek news and your comic book stuff, all that, we've got your party right here, not only on YouTube, but also on the Patreon. We do 3 new podcasts every single week. I do all the comic book solicitations. We do extra comic book reviews, and we're going to be going back and doing comic book guilds, going back through some of the great runs in comic book history, talking about them issue by issue. A lot of fun to be had on the Patreon, and a lot of value to be had there as well. If you haven't checked out the Thinking Critical Patreon, definitely check it out. There's a link in the video description.